Hey, Christina.
Hi.
How do you feel being back for re-record?
For the same information? Oh, I'm so excited.
To cue in all of our listeners here, we recorded this specific watering hole a couple days ago.
Yeah.
And something within, I don't know if it was the program or the file or something was corrupted.
Mm-hmm.
And it just would not export. Everything else would export just fine, except the episode that we had just recorded. And we had recorded 2 that day. So we got the Talkies episode out that you'll be hearing, or that you will have heard before this.
Right.
And for some reason, that one was just fine, but this one just decided it really didn't want to be released to the public.
Yeah.
So we'll see if round 2 likes us a little bit better.
Fingers crossed. Because, you know, I researched the information and then I presented the information, and that was me being involved with the information twice. This will be my 3rd.
Woo!
Oh, woo indeed.
So we both went the psychology route for film and television, which I think is quite interesting. You want to take it away with your watering hole, and we'll get right on into it?
Sure. A nonfiction literary podcast and film genre in which the author examines a crime and details the actions of people associated with and affected by criminal events is the Wikipedia definition of the media giant known as true crime. I wanted to know why we're so obsessed with it.
I like it. I like the different delivery already. Keep
Yeah.
on going.
I will. Thanks. Today we're going to dive in a little bit and figure out why we are quite obsessed with true crime and why it's got a hold on us so much.
I'm telling you, I've got this theory, man. And I don't know if it was at all disproved by the time when we talked about this earlier. So I'm going to tell you about the theory again.
Yes, please.
So my theory is we really like true crime because we as a society, specifically in the U.S., have been so far removed from death as a concept.
Right.
Like, we no longer handle our own decedents, nothing like that. Death has become a business.
Right.
And so by being able to view these horrible crimes, you know, we kind of get a little bit further in access to death. And it's in a palatable way. I don't like saying that because of how terrible the crimes are.
Yeah.
But it's through your television screen or through a podcast or...
Right. It's passive. It's something that is in a controlled way, and it is spoon-fed to you instead of you venturing out and seeing everything firsthand. It's a little more distant, but you still get it.
And you can turn it off.
Yeah.
If you decide, oh, this is too much, you can choose the alley or the avenue in which it is delivered to you.
That's true.
My mom was obsessed with this show. It was a TV show called Homicide Hunter with Lieutenant Joe Kenda and his successes with his 387 homicides that took place in Colorado Springs during his career.
Oh, okay.
So it's entirely, like, the whole entire show is, like, you sit down with Joe Kenda and he talks about the crime and what it was like as the investigator going in and everything. And it was all within Colorado Springs. And I don't know if it's because we're from Colorado or if my mom really just liked Joe Kenda or what it was, but she got very, very into this TV show.
Okay.
So I feel like, like, it was definitely a way to be in touch with your community, weirdly enough, and also with the death side of things, and I'm not sure.
Okay.
But that's my theory.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I have a couple of theories that we'll get into in just a moment. But I'm going to do what I always do, and I'm going to take us back a little bit to talk about the history a little bit. Real quick, though, I did want to say we did a reverse situation.
What you've been calling it a Freaky Friday,
yes.
Which made me laugh.
We've been Freaky Fridaying
The question is,
what?
The question is, who's Lindsay Lohan and who's oh no, what's her name? It was just in my head.
You'll get there.
Oh no.
You'll get there.
Jamie Lee Curtis? Jamie
Yes,
Lee Curtis.
there it is.
It's like,
job.
it's in there. I know it's in there. Jamie Lee Curtis. Who is who?
Ah.
Because unfortunately, I think you're Jamie Lee Curtis.
That's actually a fortunate situation.
I know. I
Thank
love
you.
her. I just mean you're the serious one between the two of us.
You know what?
And that's the unfortunate
Fair.
thing in this concept.
That's fair.
But now I'm Jamie. Hell
Hey,
yeah. How does
look
it
at
feel
that.
being
Lindsay Lohan?
Lindsay Lohan this time around.
Now that you put it like that, it feels terrible. But
Sorry. We got to make this interesting the second time around for us.
that's fair. That's fair. Otherwise, we're gonna
the information is good. Don't get me wrong. Keep listening. I promise it's good. There's just been a lot going to get us to this point.
Yeah.
So hit us with some history.
Okay. Anyway, the whole
Lohan.
Freaky Friday thing, like, I did not do near as much research as I normally do.
Oh, right.
So this is definitely going to be a one-parter. Your thing just fell, by the way, right behind you.
What was it?
It was the scary cat.
What? Oh, okay. I know what that is.
Just figured I'd let you know.
I thought it was this guy.
No.
And I was going to be disappointed, but okay.
Okay. But yeah, I didn't do near as much research as I normally do, and she did all of the research. So get ready for that, but we're just gonna go into what I found.
Great.
So history-wise, we got crime and punishment. It could be traced back as far as 1800 BCE in ancient Egypt, where you can find a murder of a government official and the punishment of the criminal outlined on papyrus. Mm-hmm. So then we've got in ancient Greece, you're going to find cautionary tales utilized in plays and poems to educate the masses about the consequences of crime. Now, in the Middle Ages, it was really common to find the streets filled with people repeating ballads and songs to each other about crimes and highwaymen and other criminals, but they are painted differently. They are painted as folk heroes instead. And it's theorized that people think that people went that direction with crime because you're living in the Middle Ages. It's kind of awful to be living in the Middle Ages, so it's a distraction, really, or entertainment at that point.
The original true crime podcast.
So correct. Now in 1617, we got Zhang Yingyu. He had a book come out called The Book of Swindles, and it came around the Ming Dynasty in China. It's a collection of stories about possibly true cases of fraud, but then again, they might be just made up. There's no real way to...
I like that. It's a whole book about fraud. Like, we really started bottom of the barrel crime over here.
You know, stealing from a gas station, a candy bar was not around in the 1600s, sorry.
That's very true.
We've got another set of works in the 16th century in China that was pretty popular. It's called The Cases of Magistrate Bao. And it's been debated if they're inspired by real events or if it's literally all fiction, but it's like a cooler Sherlock Holmes. It's about this minister who solves, judges, and sentences criminal cases. You've also got, and on the same note, you got penny dreadfuls that existed.
Bring those back. Somebody bring those back. That'd be cool.
Take my Lincoln. Are you okay?
It was the UK, wasn't it?
It was the UK.
In the 1600s.
19th century.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
Oh, that was the dynasty was in the 1600s. Sorry.
Correct. So we got fictional, the penny dreadfuls, if you don't really know what they are, you've just heard it said a lot. They are fictional stories. They were published weekly, 8 to 16-page booklets, and they cost a penny. The subjects normally were sensational or detective or criminal, supernatural related, something of that nature. It was always, one or the other.
The original magazine subscription.
Correct. Side note, you got Sweeney Todd first existing in one of those in 1846.
Hell yeah,
It was called The String of Pearls. So, there you go.
I love it. Retweet. Somebody find that and send that to me.
Between the 1500s and the 1700s, it was relatively popular in Britain for street literature to be in circulation. And this was thanks to cheaper printing methods being more accessible. Now, a boom in writers and printers reporting on capital crime had emerged, which led to leaflets and pamphlets to be commonplace around those that were literate, or at least semi-literate, which truly just meant the wealthy. These would be short, unbound books, roughly 6 to 24 pages, that were filled with horrific murders, and the details of the crimes inside. Normally, all of that information you could find in ballads and in songs too that were around those that couldn't read. So
the original murder country.
Yeah. So no matter what, it was everywhere, regardless on if you could or could not read. Most of these crimes that were spread around were domestic or sex-related murders. Big sensational ones showed women as criminals. They also had other sensationalist topics such as dismemberment, torture, and witchcraft. And those, right?
One of these things is not like the other.
You know what? That's fair.
Leave the poor woman making her stew fucking alone. Like, leave that woman alone. She didn't do anything to you.
She just likes tea.
She just likes to make beer and, you know,
right.
It's aid the sick. Leave her alone. Go back. Anyway.
Those that showcased women as the aggressor tended to depict them as beautiful and shed a sympathetic light on them. Also, these crimes had a tendency to not have a theme or anything. They could easily switch from sensationalist to spiritual to a tale with a lesson all within one pamphlet, and it was totally normal. So there wasn't like, all I want is the spiritual ones.
Sounds like our podcast.
Yeah, all over the place.
Buckle in. You'll never know what's next.
That's fair. These pamphlets continued into the 19th century in Britain and also in the U.S. Sometimes the story was about a poor, unfortunate victim, and other times it was from the perspective of the criminal, and that was aimed to make you root for the villain. These works normally were attempting to understand the psyche of the perpetrator, though. Not really like he's a hero. It's more like why we need the motivation. That's what it was about. So getting closer to the 20th century came someone we've talked about before on this podcast, Jack the Ripper.
Degas, welcome back, my guy.
God, I still feel gross even thinking about that,
I'm not even a little bit sorry because it's such a good theory, and that episode needs more views.
So Jack the Ripper, he took London into a chokehold by being one of the first serial killers with a media following. And what freaks everyone out was the fact that he was never caught, which didn't help people feel comfortable around their supposed protectors, the police.
Amen.
Fair enough. If they couldn't get this guy off the streets of London, what good were they? A lot of people were thinking like that as we were starting to notice there are monsters out there, and we can't all be safe from them, essentially.
Garfield agrees.
He sure does. Then we've got Lizzie Borden. This crime was the first of its kind, being a true crime story that had an entire country become fascinated with, specifically the criminal trial. Her arrest and prosecution was the first trial of the century that everyone had their eyes on. And after her acquittal, the world was infested with fanatics that would dissect the scene and motives, which is super common in cases today. This also drove the point home that maybe the police and the law weren't so great, and the common people had to watch out for themselves.
It was John.
It was John.
Okay, I plugged it last time, so I got to plug it this time. If you want to know more about the Lizzie Borden case, Glam and Gore on YouTube goes to the Lizzie Borden house with a bunch of her friends, and she goes ghost hunting, and she's very much a skeptic. But they get an EVP read of the scariest voice you've ever heard.
Correct.
Going, it was John. And so now anytime John comes up in the conversation, or one, we scream that. But two, if you do want to know more about the case, that's actually kind of a good place to start.
To a degree, yes.
To a degree, yeah. Like if you want entertainment with your
Mostly entertainment, yes.
Yeah.
Then we've got Ted Bundy.
This fucking guy.
He straight up jumped out of a window
In Colorado.
after being in police custody. And he actually got away from police so much. He evaded those cops. He was like barely trying. And it was a little embarrassing.
Yeah.
Then you've got O.J. Simpson's trial.
Fuck that guy.
That came into play. And once the verdict came out, more distrust of the police, of course.
Yeah, shit. He was guilty as hell, my guy.
However, people were watching. And that's the important part. Because it was so popular to watch on TV at the time that 57% of households with televisions were tuned into the final verdict on TV. That's an outrageous number.
That's an insane amount of people, dude.
I know, right? So this trial was actually a huge factor in creating the 24-hour news cycle as we know it today. Pretty impactful.
Yes.
So, speaking of today, there's no shortage of true crime shows, podcasts, movies, books, YouTube videos, TikToks, any other form of media that exists, it's there.
Oh, yeah.
It's infested everywhere. So, once the internet became easily accessible and part of the mainstream, the true crime bubble expanded even further. The podcast Serial broke records on iTunes as it was coming out. Making a Murderer did so well on Netflix that it changed the true crime game on streaming services. And now you can't go on any streaming platform without a true crime show being promoted down your throat. So it is literally everywhere. It's not just on daytime TV.
And I don't think I've ever met a person who dislikes true crime.
That's fair.
Like, I've met people who are like, oh, that's not my go-to, but I've never met anybody who's been like, oh, I won't partake in any of it.
Right.
There's some sort of, like...
hold that it has on
yeah. That everybody just like, oh, okay, yeah, like, I would never have tuned into this thing, but I watch the news and I'm very linked into a very specific crime as it's unfolding.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it's the news, but it's true crime.
That's true.
Like, just because you're watching it unfold doesn't change the fact that it's crime that you're watching.
Yeah, that's fair. I never really thought about it like that.
Like, I remember when the whole fucking Chris Watts story broke in Colorado.
I don't know anything about that.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a whole thing. I remember my mom and I, every day we'd get home from work.
Yeah.
And we would turn on the TV. And we would, what's new? What the fuck is going on with this Chris Watts story? Are we going to get justice? Because, you know, and then we found out, oh, Chris did it. Okay, great. Not great, but okay. Now we know for sure he did it. What's going to happen?
Right.
You know? And we were tuned in to that damn network.
That's wild. But, like, also it was semi-local to you guys. So.
Oh, it made national news, though.
Well, still, like, it originated locally for you, and it got national attention. That's, of course, something you're going to keep your eye on. Like, that's just how, like, anybody would do that in that scenario. If you're around it, if it's local to you, like, that could have happened to me.
Yeah.
You know? Wild. So it makes sense. So let's get out of the history portion and start to talk about the why. Why do we gravitate toward these terrifying and horrific true life tragedies? The answer isn't singular or even a guarantee. It's a bunch of theories. Evolutionary scientists, or psychologists technically, but yes, scientists to a degree.
Yes.
They think that we're drawn to them because murder, rape, and theft have always played a significant part in our human society up until we decided to be civilized. And then all of a sudden, we couldn't do those things anymore. So now, there's a little part of our brains that think it could still happen. So, when we consume this media, we're preparing to protect ourselves or those we care about should it happen to us. So we're getting more information to try and...
Insane. It's an insane theory, but it makes sense.
Yeah. It's like, if you think about it, we're in the information age.
Yeah.
We have been for a while. So the more information we can get, especially accurate information about what's going on, we can...
The better prepared we are to exist.
Right. You can be like, oh, what did they do that where they made a mistake and now they're dead.
Yep.
When if something like that could happen to me, how am I going to react differently?
Right.
So it's more of a survivalist thing. Yeah. But these are evolutionary scientists or psychologists, so it makes sense that that's where they were leaning.
Yes.
So there's that, but there's also a 2010 study at the University of Illinois showing what we already know, which is that women are more likely to consume this media than men will, and women are more interested in the depth. It's not just the surface level. They want to know every detail they can, which I get. Some theorize that women tend to do this because historically women have been the victim of most crimes, especially more often than men. However, now statistically, it's actually more likely for a man to be the victim of a crime than a woman. But women tend to feel more vulnerable to an attack should they be walking down the street or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's instinctual to protect yourselves with information. And if you ask a woman how they're getting from their car to their destination, or if they have to walk around at night, they generally have thought of the safest way possible, with extra measures put in place, even if it sounds ridiculous out loud.
Yep.
And men, on the other hand, they don't normally think about stuff like that, and especially not to the extent that women do.
I know it's true because I used to talk to my husband about it, about like how different it is to grow up as a woman, because we would talk about the difference between growing up in like a smaller city versus a bigger city.
Right.
And then so it just kind of evolved, and I was like, yeah, I don't like working in the winter, but I don't mind working in the summer. And he was like, oh, why? And I'm like, because it's dark when I have to go to my car. And he's like, okay, turn on a flashlight.
So he didn't even his first thought wasn't, oh, well, that makes sense because danger.
No, it was, oh, you can't see? Okay, let's fix that problem. And then it was, no, you don't get that. No, you're missing that. You're missing the point here. Danger, Will Robinson. Right. Danger.
Because I know, there are some guys that are out there, once they have someone, they have a girlfriend, they have a little sister, they have, their potential mate, whoever it is that they are very protective over, they look out for certain things when they're out and about, they'll make sure that they're on the side where the cars are coming if you're on the sidewalk, or they will, make sure that they can see the whole room to make sure if they need to, we have an escape route. They think about things like that.
Right.
But they don't think about if my person is out there alone at night.
Right.
What are they going to be doing?
And it's like,
to protect themselves.
If you're so concerned, well, you're together and there's safety in numbers, wouldn't you be concerned if you were out alone?
Yeah, but I don't think it's down to that. I think it's more about they're not in the situation.
Oh.
So they never had to think about that for themselves, so they would never assume that for someone else in a different position. So it just doesn't even click. They're just like, okay, call me when you get home. They'll think about stuff like that to make sure that you got home safely, but the in-between, they don't think about.
Yeah.
Which is nuts to us, but it makes sense, overall.
Right.
So, overall, it's instinct, it's societal. We've all been told all of our lives that women get fucked up in one way or another if they are not constantly on guard. So these shows can actually help us see the danger cues that are out there and find ways to respond to them like we were talking about earlier. So it tends to lean itself toward education in this realm. Yep. There is another element to true crime that people absolutely fucking love. Problem solving.
Yep.
We love to be right. We love being the smartest in the room and putting puzzles together. We also live in a society that thrives off of information. The more we can get that is accurate, the better. So it's no wonder we're obsessed with true crime media. It's a great story that we can help solve the murder to, the mystery to. We want to be a part of the solution.
Right.
And if it's real life benefits, even more reason to go for it. We can help. It's wild, to think about, that could be your sole reason for wanting to be part of true crime at all. There is a darker element. There always is.
Oh, of course.
Some think that there's a shadow side to us all, and that these killers are impressive to us, no matter how big or small in our brain. They're still impressive, and it's because they can accomplish something that we probably couldn't. The psyche of these monsters is fascinating as well. What possesses a person to do these things? Then there's the fact that we've all been a little fucked up through history, and it didn't stop once we decided to be civil. There were public executions that were normal. It was like a family outing, and you could be in company with those that were obsessed with the killer or others that were cheering for the killer to get wrecked or anywhere in between.
Yep.
It was normal. We've always been really, really messed up throughout history, no matter how you slice it. Yeah. At least now we can think that way. At the time, it was whatever.
Normal. And, like, you and I, at the time, probably, like, I know I for sure would have been going to the executions or whatever if that was a normal part of society.
Yeah.
I don't see why it would be any different than, you know, going to the theater or...
Baseball game.
Yeah. It's a community outing at that rate.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Now, there's also the thought that can pop into your modern head. Am I capable of this? Which... No, Betty, probably not. But there's impulsive thoughts that we shy away from in our day-to-day. But there's a little part of us that thinks, what if? And that's where some of the scary comes into play when people say that true crime freaks them out or that they're just scared that people can do these things to others, so it could happen to them, which is back to the previous point. But overall, you're going to have intrusive thoughts. It's going to happen. And normally, we just push those away.
Yeah.
But the fact that you can even think those at all scares people. It freaks them out.
Oh, yeah.
Which is fair.
Evidently, yeah, that's totally fair.
Yeah. There's another aspect to the whole thing where true crime shows they used to entice people by making it seem very reality TV.
I knocked that down, sorry.
Your wall's just coming apart today. You know, these things were pushed out as, like, entertainment rather than this terrible tragedy that families had to deal with. And it's there every day now, too. So if you look at any of the true crime shows that we would find on TV when we were growing up, it was all advertised as these big mysteries that you should definitely tune into or you won't find out who done it. And it came off the same as, like, you better watch or you won't find out what happens to Summer in the next episode of The O.C. Mm-hmm. Very icky. Pretty distasteful when you look at it now, but at the time, that's how you got people to watch your show.
Yeah.
So we would definitely eat it up because it falled into the same, like, algorithm that we were used to being fed anyway.
Thanks, I hate it.
Sorry.
It's okay.
There's also no checks and balances to make sure that these facts that they give you in these true crime shows are actually correct. So they could be wildly incorrect because they didn't do their due diligence, so to speak. So it could all be crap. It could literally all be just bunk for no reason other than the fact that they just wanted it to sound better.
I hate that the most, I think. Out of all of this, ugh.
Yeah, we could just be consuming something that isn't correct anyway.
Yeah, and at that point, just label it as a
work of fiction.
Whodunit.
Yeah.
And then who fucking cares?
Right.
You know?
You could say it's based off of an actual event that happened. But at that point.
The historical fiction of that, boys.
Yeah. It's a thing. So there is the unfortunate rub that a lot of people don't like to think about, which I think about a little too much, I think. These are real people. Mm-hmm. They're real families.
Yep.
There are real consequences to getting too far into all of this. Yes. Victims and criminals' families don't want to live in this hell longer than they have to. And they get harassed by people that want to know everything about the crime without thinking of the well-being of the families that are involved. There's also armchair detectives, and they think that police are trash at their job and will insert themselves online, end up fucking up, putting blame on the wrong people, doxing humans that had nothing to do with the crime in question, or they wreck the reputation of whoever they're focusing on, and then these people are ruined for the rest of their lives, regardless on if they were involved or not.
Yeah. The biggest one that comes to mind is JonBenet Ramsey and her families. I know you don't know the case. It was another Colorado case back in like 94 or 96 or something like that. Okay. But little girl was murdered in her own home and found there. And they were basically like, oh, her brother did it. Oh, her mother did it. And they're covering it up. Or like that was the big theory is one of the like... I think the biggest theory and the first one I ever heard was her and her little brother were playing and her little brother like hit her or pushed her and knocked her down or something like that. And she died. She hit her head and died. And her parents covered it up because they already lost one child. They didn't want to lose another. Oh. And then there's a bunch of other horrible, horrible theories. Right. That all involve the brother and the parents and the...
Right.
And it's just awful. And people like... There's still new information, like, or new documentaries coming out about the JonBenet Ramsey case to this day.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah.
Oh jeez.
It's a lot. People very much like that concept of there's one little piece of new information. Let's redo an entire documentary.
That's true. That's true. They open things wide open sometimes, and like. Not to say that armchair warriors don't have their place. Like sometimes they really do help a situation, like the insurrection. If it weren't for armchair warriors,
and all the people going, oh, I recognize that motherfucker right there. Right, he works in my building, or
right. So we had a lot of people that put in the time and effort and energy to make sure that these terrible, awful people got punished instead of just, oh, you were there and you broke a window and you trampled on somebody. Guess that's fine because I don't know who you are. Like they have their time and place. And sometimes there's also cold cases that are just dead in the water at that point and no one thinks about them. But then you've got a bunch of people online that dig into it a little bit more and the cops aren't going to mess around with a cold case. They got active cases they're working on. So sometimes they actually do help and they shed light on something that gets enough traction and then they open up the case again, which can be beneficial. So it's not all bad. Right. But more times than not, Stacy's not helping in the way that she thinks. And it's really hurting people and it super sucks. So just be careful when you're gonna be a part of this. Like if you're gonna actively be a part of it, if you're just someone that watches, like that's fine, live your life, whatever. But if you're actively gonna be a component in this, like don't dox people, don't fuck with people like that. Like make sure your information is correct, otherwise you will ruin lives. Period. So that's why I don't tend to like my topics to be something recent or where the family's still alive or anything of that nature. I tend to go way back in history if I can, because I just don't want to contribute to it. I don't want to be part of the problem in any way, shape, or form. But that's it. That's all I'm going to get into because I just didn't want to go any further. That felt right to just stop right there. I did not get into In Cold Blood or the Zodiac Killer or Missing White Girl Syndrome or every single psychological theory that's out there because there are tons. So much. This is a giant ass rabbit hole and you can really lose yourself in it. And that's another reason why I wanted to stop right here because I didn't want to get lost in all of it. I just wanted it to be a one-parter. And if you are going to go down this route and you want to go down that rabbit hole even further, just be careful. That's it.
You are responsible for your own media consumption.
Correct.
And people don't take enough responsibility for that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
True crime.
True crime.
That's all I got.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.